We're going to go pretty rapid fire. We had a really good, if you were in this session in the morning, we really had a great biology discussion and organic matter discussion on that it isn't, organic matter is not a thing. So I want to set a little bit of a foundational, understanding of where we're at with soil health, what we're even talking about, so that we're all on a level playing field, because as we try to move forward, then does it need to go down or up, Rod? Down. I know I got a loud mouth. Sorry about that. All right, we'll see. How's that? That a little better? All right. So we want to lay a kind of a firm foundation that soil health is not just a thing. We'll start with kind of the principles of management that it takes, because if these things that we all talk about in soil health, these functions are so good, farmers' next question is, how do I move toward getting this done? And every move along the way, every step toward improving soil health is not always intuitive. So as we move through the afternoon, we're going to start those building blocks with these speakers as to what is maybe step one. What are some of the understandings that you have to be successful? So we don't want any roadblocks or train wrecks along the way as producers are beginning to move in that direction. So I have to start, I guess, with what is it we're talking about from a just a definition standpoint, and it's back to, it's not, soil health is not a thing. It's not something that's not going to be in a jug. It's not going to be just a single thing. It's going to be a multitude of understanding and management decisions along the way. So we have this definition that's pretty universally accepted among industry, education, academia, and it's the continued. That's important because soil health needs to be on a continuing plane. It needs to be more of a journey than a destination. So whether we want soil health needs to even out the playing field from year to year, the resilience. So it's a continued capacity of a soil to function. And ultimately what we're talking about trying to achieve through soil health management is improved and regenerated soil functions. And this is what's been forgotten. We've tried to, add doctoring, to our soil to overcome some dysfunctions that have occurred over time. So when we get those 2-inch rains that happen in 3 hours, we need to still be able to get, that soil should have the function of letting that water into the soil matrix. Every place a drop lands, it should be able to go into the soil right there, not run off across the surface of the soil, picking up contaminants and other things and then taking them to our water. So we have a lot of functions that we're trying to have. So we have the continued capacity of a soil to function as a vital living ecosystem, and that's what we started the day with. The biological discussion is, if we'll manage this soil as a living ecosystem, then we'll manage it differently. And if we manage it differently as a living ecosystem, we will be able to regenerate some of those functions that biology in the soil can put together for us, can build in the soil for us. And then if we do that, then we'll have a soil that sustains plants, animals, and humans. So that definition is kind of important. It's something that everybody in the room really ought to have a pretty good grasp on what we're talking about when we say soil function. So as we start saying, how are we going to get that done, we come up with 4 principles of management, 4 management principles that help us start building that understanding. These need to be in the back of our minds with every single management operation, every single pass through the field. We need to be thinking, are these principles in place, these management principles in place? And if so, we might have a chance of regenerating that soil health and those soil functions. So we talk about, minimizing disturbance, that reducing the tillage, reducing some of the chemical disturbance, biological disturbances that actually disrupt the habitat for that soil biology. They expose that soil to degradation from erosion and sunlight and temperature. So then we need to maximize the cover. Some of our cropping systems in the Midwest, in this corn belt, are not very, they don't completely cover the soil. Soybeans are not a high residue crop. So many times, even if we stop the disturbance, we don't have the cover that we need on the soil. And as we move forward around the pendulum, we need to start thinking of ways to maximize diversity in a very non-diverse cropping system that we have in the Midwest. So that's where we start talking about cover crops and some other things to get some new crop types, new crop functions, new crop types that feed different soil biota, that give us different functions, different functional groups can live. And then we need them more often. It's what Joel Groover said at the last session. He said, we've got to provide a living root more of the time. We need a more perennial type system as far as the rooting system goes. And so these 4 principles are very, very important to have in the back of every management decision that we try to put together, every management strategy that we try to put together. So as we look at these, and I thank Jennifer Morcuchera that spoke earlier today, she put these together in a really easy to understand. These 2 principles over here, the minimize disturbance and maximize cover, these are our protectors. These actually protect the habitat of the organisms. They protect soil aggregates from disintegration. They protect the organic matter from being burned off. But if we're truly, if we implement those, we can slow the degradation of organic matter and slow the degradation of soil functions. However, if we're truly going to regenerate and rebuild that soil function back, then we're going to have to find a way to feed a wider range of organisms, and we're going to have to provide more food more of the year so that we can actually start building organic matter through the organisms in the soil, like Joel Groover was talking about. The best, most stable organic matter, as we start building it back, it needs to go through an organism. Okay, and so that's how we have to be thinking of these as ways. Every part of our management, we have to have these strategies in the back of our mind. Okay, and so if we talk to farmers and ask farmers, have you ever seen soil health illustrated before your eyes? Have you ever seen these 4 principles that validate that they actually do add to productivity? And most farmers in the room, if they ever look at a picture like this is actually from our Infield Advantage. It's an enhanced aerial photograph that we fly in Indiana right at silking time. And so the colors kind of show up. And most farmers will tell you they've seen on yield maps, they've seen differences in yields that relate to these colors. And so a map like this, you see the drainage area that's a little darker green. Darker green equates to more health. If you take that all the way to harvest, higher health at this growth stage generally means higher yield, right? It equates to that. Most farmers get that and see that. Here's an area of past erosion. It's a little thinner, a little paler, a little poorer health. It will have a lower yield come harvest time. It's going to equate to a yield map. So we see these are normal anomalies through a field, but then normal things that we see. But here's an anomaly that kind of shows up straight north and south, goes across the drainage ways. So what would a farmer say that probably is? As it's higher health, higher soil health showing up, higher crop health showing up. What would you say that is if we were just asking? It's an old fence row. Okay, right there. Well, we know it's an old fence row because here's the property line, and so when we lay the property line boundary over, we know it's even been a property line, so it's been a fence row for a longer period of time. And so when I ask farmers, have you ever seen those 4 principles validated on your farm? And they may not know at first, but let's go back to that fence row effect. What did that fence row have in place for a longer period of time? Did it have very much disturbance? Did it have pretty maximized soil cover? Did it have some diversity? Did it have continuous living roots? And that equates to higher crop health and higher yield at the end of the day, so higher productivity potential. So all of the agronomic benefits that we have in agriculture can be revealed through, if we could find a way to manage for those 4 principles, we can validate them many places on the farm that these are real. This whole soil health thing doesn't just make you feel good. This isn't just a thing. This isn't a fad. This is real, relevant management decisions that you can actually add real productivity and efficiency to your bottom line. This is a real thing that we're talking about here when we talk about managing for soil health. Okay? So here's another example that I'll just show you. Does anybody see this? This is an actual yield map. See the dark upside down boot? Dark upside down boot? See the dark upside down boot? Yield. That's yield from an area of the field that had those 4 principles, ultimately had higher soil health, which meant it had higher resilience. They show up before our very eyes many times. So if we could manage our entire farm like the fence row, if we had the knowledge and the understanding of managing for soil health management across our entire farm, what would that mean to us? Could we achieve that? And here's what happens when we see a field that's side-by-side comparisons. Okay? 2 generations ago, Grandpa owned both of these fields. Okay, and sometimes when Grandpa goes off to the big farm in the sky, the farm gets split. Different people start managing that farm differently. So over time, management actually affects the soil function. And when we have adverse weather conditions and things, then farmers will look to signs like this to says, you know, it's always more fun when you're comparing your farm against Cousin Eddie's. Now, I don't know if that's Cousin Eddie, but, you know, we all know Cousin Eddie from the movies, all right? So we always like to look at Cousin Eddie, you know, and say, boy, you know, his management, you know. So it validates the very soil health. When we have a field that's been in long-term continuous no-till, many years of continuous cover crops, we have those 4 principles in place for a long period of time. It gives us validation that we ought to be pursuing this kind of management for soil health. Okay, it helps us be okay with it in our minds. So the next step is, how do I get that done? The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to focus on management that actually improves organic matter. And we learned last session that it's not just a matter of increasing organic matter, it's about improving organic matter. There's all these different pools of organic matter. Organic matter is not a thing either, it's a bunch of things, and there's all these different pools that actually provide different functional improvements. So we use terms like improving organic matter and improving aggregate stability. In a very short period of time, don't look at just the color, but look at the aggregation of this soil that happened after one series of cover crops, one season of cover crops. So we start looking for improved aggregate stability, and that gives us increasing water infiltration, increasing available water to those plants. And we get improved nutrient cycling, and then ultimately if we get all those things happening, we'll start balancing and improving the soil biology, and that will feed right back to a continually improving up here. So these are the things that when we talk about measuring and assessing for soil health, these are the indicators and the functions we're looking to see improvements in. But we have to have a management strategy to make this happen. And so we're going to start putting together a management strategy that is a collection of our conservation practices that we're very familiar with, but each of them going to have a specific job or task or purpose as we move toward seeing those improvements I just mentioned. It's going to have a management system that has those 4 principles in place at all times. Those principles are always complementing each other, and that gives us a synergistic effect. Each cropping system will have maybe a different combination of practices working together, and those have to be tried and logical in your location, on your soils, and your enterprise. So that's where we will need to work with local producers and provide those local networks that we talked about to get this done. Okay, so here's just an example here in the Midwest. This is kind of the Midwest and Corn Belt section. So if we look at a system, we start putting together a management system, we would start with, we're trying to address those 4 principles, so we're going to reduce disturbance. So we look at no-till. But it's not just the absence of tillage. I call it a quality no-till system, and I'll illustrate what I mean by that here in just a minute. But it's not just the absence of tillage. So be very specific. No-till is not just a thing either. Like I said, organic matter is not a thing. No-till is not a thing either. It's a very dynamic management process that you have to know all of the different steps to make that system work. We talk about cover crops, but not just any old cover crop. Those cover crops need to be strategic. It's back to that, if we can get an understanding of which cover crops have which effects on the biology and complement which crops, then we're going to be able to put together a better system. And so we move down through and we have a more adapted nutrient management system because now we're not tilling. We have integrated weed and pest management system that matches the addition of cover crops and the no-till system. We try our best to diversify crop rotations. The beauty is we can integrate precision farming technology and then still have some prescriptive buffers to add to the overall system. So we're building a system that complements itself. So if we look a little closer, we've got all of these systems that we have to talk about. Is when it becomes quality no-till is going to have a different kind of nutrient management, timing, different placement, different system. It's going to be different than maybe it was in conventional tillage, and I'll try to cover that in a little bit more. But quality no-till, strip till, if you're going to be integrating cover crops, then your no-till system may change. It may look different. That planter setup may be different. You're going to probably need some starter fertilizer on there or a way to change the timing of your fertility. You're going to change how you manage pests when you integrate a cover crop. All in all, these things are all complementary, but each one is very dependent on the rest. If you just think you're going to change or add one thing, you will probably miss huge opportunities. These have to all complement each other so that the entire system enjoys the benefit, the productivity benefit, and the environmental services benefits that we're after. Okay, so there's all different kinds of enterprises that this fits in. I want to spend just a little bit of time because this causes more train wrecks, and that we would spend nearly a day on each one of these in a true training session where we put together how these all fit together in a complementary session. But I want to just give you for example on the nutrient management. When I say, because this causes a lot of train wrecks in this system. So we're putting this system together, and the first thing we have to understand, when we stop tilling the soil, we start adding cover crops, we change the biological habitat and the biological delivery of nutrients. So if we're going to have a 4 R's approach to nutrient management, and we're going to be looking at a soil health management system, you have to absolutely understand what happens with soil organic matter and the organic nutrient contributions and cycles. Okay, if you don't understand that change, you could be sideswiped by something that you were an unintended consequence, and that can bite you as far as your economics and the bottom line. We want to avoid those things. Okay, so we have to understand C to N ratios. We have to understand what are the biological drivers that deliver nutrients to our crops. And so we look at a nitrogen cycle. You see this nitrogen cycle. It's very simple, very plain. Very common. You see this. There's all these chemical processes that change, or urea, hydrolysis. Then it goes to ammonium, and then it can be lost through volatilization. It can go on to nitrification. All these chemical processes that ultimately drive changes in the nitrogen cycle. So I keep saying the word chemical because somebody's out there supposed to be stopping me, right? So are these chemical processes? What's missing from the whole diagram? Every one of these are biologically driven. And so if we change the biology, we change how we're managing the biology, and we're changing the biological processes, they're going to change how they deliver nutrients. We have to understand that no matter how good a job we do with nutrient placement, about 50% efficiency, 50% of the nutrients we apply get to the crop. The biology, the natural system of the biology delivering those nutrients to the crop are going to do the rest. We can't stop that. We don't want to stop that. We need to understand that. And so when we stop tilling the soil, here's kind of the take-home message as we look at nutrient management changes. As we stop the disturbance, here's microbial activity. Here's that respiration that we were talking about earlier. In our conventional tillage system, that respiration really goes up about this early time frame in the year. What happens in our conventional systems early in the spring? Tillage. What happens to respiration then? Goes through the roof, right? What during that respiration process, those microbes are delivering what to the soil and potentially to the crop? Nutrients, right? It's releasing nutrients. It's at the expense of the carbon that is lost through respiration. It's at the expense of that, but there is a big flush of nutrients as we release that carbon to the atmosphere. Our entire agronomy management system is based on that system. So when we take that out of the equation and we switch to a no-till system, that respiration changes, that biological activity changes, it releases nutrients more timely along the growth of the crop, but it is missing something right here. And so if we don't know that's going to happen, that can be a very, very good thing. We'd rather have CO2. CO2 being released here goes where? Goes into the canopy of the crop. Where does CO2 released right here go? Is anything growing? It just goes to the atmosphere, so it's kind of lost. But we would like to grab that CO2. This is actually a benefit if we know this is going to happen. So the way we manage for that is just one nutrient management adaptation that we have to know about, or it derails us. This is just from not tilling the soil. What if we add a cover crop growing right there? What happens to the release of nutrients along this timeline? It's pushed back even further. So it's even more important to maybe provide some earlier nitrogen to compensate. Not more total nitrogen, but some earlier. That's just one little tidbit of a management change that you have to know to do, or the economic outcome will not be positive for you. You've missed that opportunity. And if you've missed that opportunity, then you're probably not going to be as satisfied, and you're not going to be able to integrate this system the way you want to. Okay? It's all about understanding C to N ratios and what that does to our biological processes. If we know that, then the rewards are going to be very, very good. We're going to be able to use that to optimize production rather than be derailed by it. Okay? So all those agronomic efficiencies will be optimized if we can maximize our soil health and understand how to manage for a living ecosystem. Okay? We've got a few, if you want more information, I'll just put this up there. If you Google NRCS soil health, there's a lot of this kind of data, a lot of these help sheets and things that are available for you as you look forward and put together a strategic system for your area. Okay? All right.